So batch class, virtual class,
Batch class and
virtual class.
virtual class.
Inheritance.
Have to use
Inheritance, right?
keyword virtual for inheritance. That is fine. Okay, let's cover the basic parts of trigger, and we will for now we will complete the Apex classes, and we will start the LWC after this. Okay, so just keep a couple of things in mind. That is, not everything can be taught. So some of the things you have to self learn, and if you have question you can come back. We are always ready to answer the questions, but important thing is that not everything can be spoon fed. So primary thing, you have used flow, you can use Apex action. To use Apex in flow, what we have to do, I haven't told, but this is a very simple and basic thing that you can identify or learn of your own, right? So uh, go for those things, those small things like queuable class and future method. Future method, like both the things I have uh, just touched upon, I have named them, but I haven't gone in deep because there is nothing to go in deep about that. So ideally, you should be looking into that. If you have question, you can just come back and we can discuss those things. Let's go for Apex. Release that trailhead. So couple of details I just need to share with you guys. Let me share those first, and then we will start. Fine. Okay, primarily these two. So let me share my screen. So primarily, what is trigger? The concept of trigger. What is trigger? Trigger is something like, say I am doing some database action. What kind of action? DML. DML means data manipulation. That is insert, update, delete, undelete, this kind of things. So whenever we are doing any kind of action, DML action on any object, here in Salesforce, it is any object, otherwise for any database, any table. When we are doing any action, if we need to do some automation, some work automatically associated with that action, okay, then we need trigger. So if it is insert or update or delete or undelete, this kind of things, if we are doing at that time, if I need to do some associated action automatically, at that time, I need triggers. So triggers in Apex is similar to flows which are record triggered flows. So how record triggered flows execute? That execute whenever there is any insert or update, right? So but in Apex we can have multiple things like insert, update, delete, merge, upsert, and undelete. Undelete is another action that we can do when we initially delete. If we are not deleting bulk records, then what happens, that record will be stored or will be moved into bin. Okay, which we generally say recycle bin. So in that recycle bin, from that recycle bin, I can just undelete, that is restore that record. Even if I am doing this, at that time also, I can fire a trigger. Okay. So how many like when we are handling triggers, what can happen? Like in flow also you have seen that. That is whenever we are doing any kind of action, like this kind of action, there can be two different scenarios. One is before and one is after. So what is before and what is after? Before insert means, it does not mean that, anyway, not for, I'll describe that scenario for after. So before insert means the record is not inserted till now. Say I am just inserting one record in account. So before insert means what happens? The ID is not created till now. The ID is not created. Fine. What is after insert? After insert means the ID of that record is already created. Fine. Similarly, if it is delete, before delete, I have the ID of the record. But after delete, I will not have that ID of the record. But the values, whatever I am getting in getting the values, that will be there. But the ID will not be there. That is the primary difference. Now there is another thing. After insert or after delete, it does not mean that the whole transaction is completed, right? So it is a kind of intermediate state where you can just work on the record where it is in a state. If it is after delete, then what is going to happen, from that perspective you were just working on that right now. So it is not like your transaction is completed. So if there is any trigger in after delete, and if there is any error, that means your record is not deleted actually. If that trigger is showing any error, and it blocked the execution of that apex, that means the transaction is not completed. And that is true for any of these triggers. If there is any error, then your actual insert or update or delete or upsert, that will be hampered. So always be sure when you are writing your code that this kind of scenario, like there is any say you are just uploading the records in bulk, like using CSV data uploader, you are uploading records, and if you have any trigger, what will happen, if there is any error, it will block the whole execution. We have the way to mention, like whether if there is only if there is issue with one record, then uh, that can be like all or none kind of scenario we can define when we are having DML. But in trigger, most of the time it is very difficult. If there is any error, that whole batch will get blocked. The records will not get inserted or updated or deleted. So remember that part. Okay. Just give me a second. Okay. So you got the basic idea of trigger?
Yes, sir.
Any
Yes,
question
sir.
till now? No question till now, right? So let's move into this thing. Whenever you are writing any trigger, that must be bulkified. Like your trigger code, like say you are doing any UI action, that is, whenever one account is inserted, I will create one contact. And that is UI concept you are taking. But always remember, for objects, we can upload data, right? And if there is any trigger, then that trigger will always execute until and unless I am providing any mechanism to block it. Until and unless I am providing any mechanism to block it, so that whenever I am writing any trigger, that must be bulkified. So trigger 0, trigger dot new in third bracket 0. Don't use this kind of syntax anywhere. Always remember, whenever you are writing trigger, you must be using the collection framework. You must be treating that you are going to get multiple records when that trigger is getting executed. Okay. Now let's come to trigger syntax. So how we have to define trigger? That it will start with trigger rather than class, right? Trigger, then trigger name, whatever you want to do, on object name, on account, on contact, on opportunity. If it is any custom object, say uh, custom object one, then that would be custom object one underscore underscore C, because it should be the API name, right? And then we have to define the events, on which event it will execute, like before insert, after update, before update, all these things. In which context this trigger should execute, that we have to write. Okay. Now, trigger context variable. What is trigger context variables? Is executing something I will not cover today. Primarily is insert, is update, is delete, all these are context variables. Okay. Is undelete, and also is before and is after. Why it is required? I can write 5 triggers. One should be for before insert, one should be for after insert, one should be for before update, one should be for after update, right? I can just define multiple triggers on one object. Then why we need this trigger context variables? Answer of this thing is, please remember, ideally we can, like technically we can define multiple triggers in one object, but that is the worst practice. Forget about best practice, that is the worst practice. Why? For two reasons. First one, say you have written 5 triggers, you do not have the ability to control the order of execution. Like say I have written 5 triggers, trigger 1, trigger 2, trigger 3, trigger 4, trigger 5. When you are doing the insert or update or whatever operation, triggers whatever you have written, you cannot control which trigger will execute first and which trigger will execute last. Clear? That is the first reason. Second reason, say you want to do same thing, same action. If uh, there is any insert on in any object, or if there is any update, like before insert and before update, in both the scenarios you have to do same thing, same work. In that scenario, if you define different triggers with different events, then you have to write the same code in two different places, and that is absolutely against the best practice. That is not reusability of code. So for reusability of code, we should be writing the code in a way that all the things, whatever we are writing, all the methods or all the functionalities should be in one place, and I would be referring to that whenever I want to call that. Why I am saying this, I will come to that part. I'll come to that part. This is one of the most important thing you need to understand. Before insert, after insert, before update, after update, what you can do and what you cannot do, right? Whenever and when you should be using before insert and when you should be using after insert. First thing, if you are trying to update or trying to modify any value in any field of the current object or current record, in that scenario you should be using before. Always it should be before insert. You can see, can change the fields using trigger.new. What does that mean? In trigger.new, whatever I am getting, trigger.new actually that will return a list. In that list, in that specific element, I can just iterate through the elements, that is the records. In any record, if I want to change, say somebody, my requirement is whenever I am getting the phone number field, I should be adding +91. If +91 is not there, obviously it should be a before insert trigger or before update trigger, not in after. What I can do in that trigger.new, when I am iterating through that, I can go to that phone number, I can check that whether +91 is added there or not, and I can just add it and just directly assign. I don't need to execute any update statement to update the value of the current record. That is the trigger.new. In the trigger.new, if I directly assign it, normally if I assign it, then it will update automatically. I don't need to write any update statement separately when I am in before trigger. In after trigger, I cannot modify trigger.new. In trigger.new, when I am iterating through trigger.new, what it will do, it will give me those values, but I cannot directly assign any value. I have to execute update. Say this is before account. Sorry, if this say this is account object, and I am just executing after insert. In after insert on account, if I have to change anything, what I have to do, I have to write another update statement after that trigger code, in that trigger code, right? So in the trigger code, trigger means what will, when it will execute, say before insert or before update or after insert, after update. These are the scenarios, that is when my DML is happening. So I have written a trigger, say after update. Within that after update, I am again writing update statement. So it will create recursion on same object. So don't ever do that. If you have to update anything, any field value in same object, do that from before and refer those things in after. If you want, if it is the same trigger, you can refer those values as well. You can extract that. I'll show it later. So primarily you got this, and I have already shared this trigger developer .salesforce.com link. So go through this properly. This is very much required. So except trigger.new, what else we have? We have trigger.old. Okay. What is trigger.old? Trigger.old is, if I am doing any update, what was my previous value? If I am doing delete, what was my previous value? Right? You cannot use trigger.new in delete because you are deleting that, right? So what is my previous value? That I need to know. So trigger.old, what is happening? Like, say if it is update scenario, and say there is a phone number 999-888-4444. I am changing it 999-888-5555. Then trigger.new, when I am using trigger.new, in the phone number field, I will get this 5555 number. In trigger.old, I will get that 4444 number. So what is trigger.new and what is trigger.old? Trigger.new is giving you the newest value. Trigger.old is giving you the older value. Fine. Second thing, which is important, trigger uh, can provide you another thing rather than only, not only trigger.new. Trigger.new map and trigger.old map, what it will do, with the ID, it will create a map. Trigger, when you are executing, say there are 200 records on which your trigger is executing. So trigger.new will give you that those 200 records as a list. If I use trigger.new map, then it will give me a map where that ID is my key. Correct? Got it till now? Any question?
Sir, explain the trigger.new map again, sir.
Trigger.new will give you the list of records which is getting inserted or updated or deleted, that is on which you are executing the DML. Those records will come in trigger.new. Clear?
And new map, sir, trigger.new map.
Trigger.new map, the same thing you will get in map format rather than as a list format. Trigger.new will give you a list. Trigger.new map will give you a map.
Okay, okay, sir.
Fine. I believe we are good here.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
How you can create trigger. All these things are there. I'm not getting into these things. This is one of the important thing. Go through this as well. The best practice for bulkifying trigger. Okay. Trigger and bulk request best practice. Go through all of this. This you must not do this thing. You must not do this new 0.id. That means you are taking the first item of the list and you are putting the id. This can only be done if there is a very specific scenario. Otherwise, don't do this. Always do this one. For this is the object trigger.new. It is actually you are using the for loop for each loop, and with that id you are actually finding it. But again, this is also wrong. Don't do this. Don't ever do this, because within loop you must not write the query. Your query must be outside of this. Okay, so here you have changed one thing, that is you are not using this thing here. But again, this is not the best practice. This is the best practice. You have taken the key set trigger.new map.key set. I told you what is new map, and from there you are taking the users in a list. Now let's come back to uh, example of trigger. Just give me a second. So I just need to go through trigger Salesforce. Let me check which one will be easy for you. Okay, so this one is good. Also, you can look into this one. I will. Ideally, how we should be writing the triggers. Now, let's go through the process of writing trigger. This one might be little difficult for you to understand. Don't worry. Once the LWC classes are over, we will come back and we will do this. For now, you can write the trigger in a simpler way. First thing is that you must not write the trigger logic within the trigger. So within trigger, what you will do? Within trigger, you will define like this thing. Mm, what was this one? Understand properly trigger syntax. Yes. So you will be writing this trigger, my trigger on account, and you will define the events, whatever events you have. Now, on what event you want to do what. The simplest way of writing trigger is that you will call a method. How you will call a method? You will just check if trigger dot is before and trigger dot is insert or trigger dot is before and trigger dot is update. In that scenario, what will happen? If it is before insert or before update, in that scenario, it will be called. Your method, whatever method you are trying to put, that will be called in that scenario. Say this is your trigger. What you will do? Ideally, you will write if not is insert, trigger dot is insert. It should be is insert and the syntax is trigger dot, right? I am not writing the whole thing. This is trigger dot. And this one or simply call a method from a class. Whatever like you are whatever class you are writing, say you have writing a class trigger handler. And within that trigger handler, you have a method, say void method trigger handler. Okay. And whenever you are having this method, if it is a trigger handler method, there should be some uh, whatever the data type, say you will be providing the data type and then new list data type old list. You will write your code here, whatever code you want to write. And when you were having this thing, you will call this method from here. Don't define within if. Ideally, you should be defining it outside it. Why? You will understand when you are writing the code. If you are defining this within this if, outside this if, you cannot use it. And if you want to make this method if you want to make this method as static, that also you can do. Most of the time we will write the handler methods as static, and from here you can simply call this method, that is t dot trigger dot new and trigger dot old. So these two things I will pass, and once I pass this might not be the correct syntax. Probably you need to assign something else as well. But anyway, I'm not going into syntax. So whenever you are writing any trigger, what you will do, you will check the context variables. After checking the context variables, you will call a method of a different class. If this method needs to be used in a different way, or there are other methods you have to call, you can call it after this. So when you are doing this, what happens is that, say there are five things you want to do when before insert and before update, correct? In before insert and in before update, you want to do three things. You can control which one will execute first and which one will execute next. And it does not require that you have to do it in this way. You can just break this if, and you can do this is insert is before, that should be in one place. Another if can be is insert is after, is insert is update, sorry, is before is update. So these two things, these two conditions, you can just break it down and you can have two different things. So in whatever scenario, your action will be called properly. You don't need to write it in this way, not always. Okay. So first thing is that you should be writing a different class to define the handler methods. And within trigger, you must not write any code. You will only uh, check the context variable and call those methods. This is the simplest framework which you will be using now. If you have to write a trigger now, you will do at least this thing. What else we have to do, what else we can do, I will come to that later. But for now, is it clear? Is it clear to everybody?
Yes, sir.
So don't write the logic within trigger. Always write the logic in a separate class and method and call it within trigger. How you will call it? You will use the context variables, is insert, is before, is update, is after, all these context variables. Whatever context you want to execute that logic, from there you will call that method. You must not write the logic within trigger. You must not write single record like whenever you are operating on single record, you must not write any code like that, like trigger new third bracket 0. It must not be like that. Don't write query within loop. Always write the always take the specific values. Like I have just passed trigger.new and trigger.old. You can send trigger.new map, trigger.old map as well, and you can receive it from here, and you can operate on these things. This trigger.new list, this is actually give you the specification, like within this, if you assign some value, it will automatically get assigned. Okay, so this is the way you should be writing it, but there are more better robust frameworks of trigger can be developed. Nowadays we are omitting this because flow can do most of the things. Very smaller things we are doing in trigger nowadays. So for that you can utilize this thing. But when we are actually having or doing any project, it cannot, like, it will not make much utility if we do only for one thing. But for all the aspects, if we have to handle it, like for flow, for trigger, for all these things, when I am uploading data, bulk data I am uploading, how I can switch off these triggers? Flows at least I can deactivate, though that is not a very best practice. So what we can do, ideally I should be taking one custom metadata. In that custom metadata I will define some values, right? Say account trigger, active should be one field. Like there should be two fields at least. One is trigger name, and another one is or the object name, and the other one is trigger active. That would be a boolean, true or false. When I am coming to this, I will check with these conditions. Whenever these conditions, whatever I am writing here, along with that, I should be checking that metadata as well. If it is account trigger, I will check if that in that metadata, if that account thing, like this account trigger, uh, whether that boolean value is true or false. If that metadata, in that metadata, if the value is true, then I will execute this. If that value is false, active trigger, if that value is false, I will not execute the logic. In that way, what will happen? Technically, the trigger will execute, but the logic will not execute. That means I am just switching off the trigger. This is one of the useful technique we use uh, to switch off triggers dynamically. Like I have to do a data load, I have to switch off the trigger. I will go to that metadata. In that metadata, I will just change the boolean value for those objects where it is required. And once it is done, I can do the data upload. The triggers logic will not execute, and after that load, I will go back and change the metadata values to true again. Who didn't? Who, like? Have you got this, or I have to repeat whatever I was saying? Did you get the idea, or I have to reiterate?
So once more repeat.
Say you have this trigger, right? In production you can deactivate trigger, but you cannot deactivate the trigger directly in production. What you have to do, you have to deactivate in UAT and then you have to deploy it. When you are deactivating something, it will create the issue with the test class and all these things, because for trigger also you have to write test class. Now the scenario is, that is, block the trigger when you are uploading data. How you can do that dynamically? Define a metadata. Fine. There should be two fields. Object is active. Here you have account, you have contact. These are the records. Okay, these are the records. Opportunity, custom object one, custom object two. Okay, and here you are putting value. Now, when you are checking these conditions, along with this, check the condition with and this metadata, whatever the name is, say trigger execution. You can check this trigger execution. I am not writing the exact syntax. Okay. Trigger execution, and this one is account dot account. So you are checking the value of trigger execution
Sir,
of is
I have a small question. This is the process how we deactivate the like trigger and all. Correct, sir?
right.
Okay, so we have to choose individual records and we can use it or like dot account or dot contact like that.
In this is not the correct syntax. I am not writing the syntax here. I'm just showing you what you can do. You can just how to this is the way you can get the metadata and all these things. Simple. Fine. If you just define one uh, metadata, that is MDT, and if you do this get all, you'll get all the values with the row name, whatever you are using. With that, you can just put the field name and you can get the field value. It is simple, just like this. I'm not giving you that exact syntax here. I'm just telling you, if it is trigger underscore MDT you are using, and for that account and is active, if this is true, then only your this logic will execute.
Okay. Okay.
If I make it false, and if you have this condition, then what will happen? This trigger logic will not execute.
Okay,
So I have a
like in admins,
configuration way. Yes, go ahead.
like in admin, like we are using rules and like rules and details over
you
there.
can you can simply, with this metadata, when you are doing any upload or any other work, you can simply use this technique to block the logic, so the trigger will execute, but this logic will not execute. this
Got
logic
it.
will be this logic will be blocked, because it will bypass it. It will come to this. If the condition will be false, it will go to second bracket. It will not execute this logic.
That's true.
So that means
Okay.
the trigger is not executing. If I have my trigger and there is no logic written, that means that trigger is not executing.
Correct.
So in this way, we can handle execution of triggers uh, through configuration way. Like we can utilize metadata and then utilize these things in this way. There are some other tricky things like how we can handle trigger recursion. I will not go through that. I will close this class by this one. this thing. How ideally we should be writing trigger handler pattern, obviously it should be there, but there should be a delegator in between this trigger handler. Right now, what I have told you, you have your S object, you have your trigger. From trigger, you will call the business logic through a method, through a class and method, right? So your business logic 1, 2, up to n, whatever is written, you will call them. From here, you will call them. But the actual or the most useful, I would say, most useful way of handling triggers or to writing triggers is that you should have a dispatcher or delegator in between your business logic. Why you need this kind of dispatcher? The thing is that till now for this trigger, what you are doing, you are directly calling this business logic. Now say you have uh, two different scenarios from where you will define or you will check whether you want to block the. Right now what I have told you is that where is that? So you are defining one metadata. With that metadata you are making whether it is true or false. Depending on that you are executing the trigger logic. If you have this scenario that you have to block all the triggers at the same time, how you can do that? You have different objects. So those different objects will have different triggers. Now if you bring one delegator or this intermediate level, like all the triggers will call this delegator, and from that delegator you will call the business logic. So your trigger is now unified in a single place, like all the logic will be called from here. Dispatcher or delegator, generally this is called dispatcher, and delegator is also fine. Now here, if I have one single boolean value which is true or false in any metadata or any custom level or anywhere, depending on that I can block the whole or execution of all the logic of all the triggers directly within that class. Whatever method I am calling, I will just unify it with that boolean, that if this is true, then you will go for these logics. Otherwise, if it is false, I will not put any else. So all the logic, all the delegation of the logic is actually blocked, can be blocked from here. That is one part. Second thing is that whenever multiple people are working in one project, you don't know you don't know who is doing what, right? So there might be scenario that you have a trigger on account which is updating contact, and you have a trigger on contact which is updating account. So this is a cyclic scenario, right? So this cyclic scenario is called trigger recursion. So this trigger recursion, how to block that? The simplest way to block that is that define a static boolean in one class, in a separate class. Whenever you are uh, starting your execution from account trigger, make that trigger that boolean value false. Like you will get into that logic and you will make the value false. Why you will make the value false? Because first trigger execution you have got into that logic. Once your logic is executed, you have made the value false, static value, so it will not get changed anyway through that execution process. Now from there you have called some logic which will update the contact. So contact is updated, so it will again that once that contact is updated, the contact trigger will execute. Trigger will come back, and it will try to update the account. It will update that account, And after that, when it will try to execute the trigger of account once again, it will find that that boolean value is false. So if that boolean value is true, then only I should be executing the account trigger account logic. So in that scenario, it will find it false. It will not execute the account trigger once again. So your execution cycle, one cycle is complete. After that, you are breaking by this logic. Otherwise, what would have happened that if I was not using that boolean value, true false static boolean value, it will again execute that account trigger. It will that will in turn update contact, and contact trigger will be executed again. That will come back to account. So that means that cyclic thing will go on or carry on, right? You are getting the basic logic.
Yes, sir.
So theoretically, at least understand this thing. You don't need to do this implementation right now. Primarily, for now, whatever you will do, if you have to write any trigger, you will write the trigger in this way that you will check the context variables, you will create another class, put the logic there, and call that from the trigger.
Sir,
That's the
I have a
Mhm.
I have a problem some declarators.
uh, problem
Declator
in problem in what?
not not clear the declarator part.
What is not clear to you?
Declarator part, sir.
Which one?
Declarator part. Object.
De-
Declare.
declare.
Declare part.
What to declare?
No, sir, I think he is asking about delegated, sir. Like,
Delegator. Okay, okay.
Sir, delegator.
This delegator part.
Delegator.
Okay.
Yes.
So what you are doing? mm, this is your. This is one of the trigger, right? So from this trigger, you are calling this class trigger handler and the method. If I have another trigger on contact, what will happen? I will write uh, contact trigger on contact, and I will create another class and I will write the method. So all these calls from all the objects, it is disjoint, right? Trigger of contact calling business logic 1, but that is calling directly. Trigger account business logic 2, that will be called directly if I do not have this delegator.
Okay.
Till that part clear?
Yes.
Now, if I have to do a kind of unification, that is, I have to block all my triggers for one scenario, how I can do that? Simplest way, you will create one intermediate layer. So from trigger, you will not call the business logic directly. You will always call that intermediate layer. So contact trigger is also calling this intermediate delegator. Account object trigger is also calling this intermediate delegator. Opportunity or custom object, any object trigger is actually calling this delegator. Fine.
Okay.
And from there, you will be calling the business logic. It is only a dip, it is just a layer.
Sir, how to write this?
Simple, you are calling one method. Here you will define another class, intermediate delegator.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Class delegator, one method. Within that method, you will just call that intermediate method from trigger. And from that delegator class, you will call that actual method.
Okay.
Nothing else.
Okay.
You are just calling another, like you are having two different things. One is your trigger, one is your class. Here you will be having two another more class, and that intermediate class will not do anything, only it will call the actual method. That's it.
Okay, okay, sir.
So now you have that way to, as you have unified it in a layer, you can just block that class with some variable condition. You can just put some condition from, say, metadata. You are just putting all triggers. If that is false, then don't execute anything. So within your delegator class, you can directly, for all the methods, whatever you are calling from there, you can just bypass if it is false. So that means all your triggers are blocked. That is not the only reason to do this, but at least this is one of the valid reasons which you can understand right now. There are other complications as well which we can handle with these things. Anyway, you don't need to go through this right now because it is not going to give you or create much value for you. If you have to write a trigger, don't go for this delegator for now. Simply just create the handler and call the handler method from the trigger. That's it. Any question?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, Suraj.
Sir, I have a small doubts in like trigger dot old and like trigger dot new. You told like trigger dot old, it's carry old value, right? Like if I have any like phone number 9955, and after that I use trigger dot new, means trigger dot new update new value like 99 replace from like a 55 or whatever. But something is written there like you cannot delete trigger dot new. I cannot understand.
You cannot delete.
Yeah, trigger dot new, and
You
why
can,
would uh,
in delete, you cannot use trigger.new. From delete context, it is not like you cannot delete trigger. Anyway, you are not going to delete trigger.new. But in context of delete, you cannot use trigger.new. That is what is written, right?
yes,
Yes, that means when I am deleting, if I am deleting one record, how I can get the trigger.new value? You tell me.
yes, sir. It's not. I cannot find, sir, because it's already deleted.
Absolutely. Any more questions from anyone else?
Sir, I have one more question in like Apex test class.
Okay, that we will do after. Like, if anyone else has any other question, then we will take that. Other after that, I will look into your test class.
Yes.
Anyone else? Any question? Otherwise, we will close the class. Shubha Mohalaya. And after probably next week, I'm not sure. Whoever, probably next week there will be no class. But after that, we will start with the LWC. Okay.